I shot him because he was forcing himself on my wife. And as far as I knew, when he finished with her, he was going to kill me.
Freeman, my husband!
911, what's your emergency?
Okay. Something wrong with my wife.
Is your wife breathing at this point?
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Can you tell me what's going on?
I don't know what's going on. My wife is non-responsive.
The house on Clara Drive had already seen blood once before. Just after midnight on September 16th, 2019, Hillsborough County deputies were called back to the same Brandon, Florida home they had been to years earlier. Inside the dim, cluttered living room, a woman lay motionless on the couch. Her eyes were open. Blood pooled near her feet. The air smelled of smoke, alcohol, and neglect. The caller was her husband, now 77 years old. His voice on the 911 call was flat, uncertain, almost distant. He said he didn't know what had happened. He said she wasn't responding. He said he thought she wasn't breathing. The woman was Yana Flores. She'd been shot once in the chest. 2 vodka bottles sat nearby, one empty, one nearly so. Detectives would later find dog feces on the floor, cigarette smoke staining the walls, and multiple firearms in the house. One of them, a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver, sat in a bedroom nightstand. It held one spent casing. That gun had a history. 6 years earlier, it had been used to kill another person in the same living room. In March of 2013, Ralph Wald was 70 years old and recently remarried. A retired US Army lieutenant colonel and former lawyer, he had lived on Clara Drive for nearly 2 decades. Though his health was declining, he remained sharp, disciplined, and deeply shaped by a military career that included combat in Vietnam and a Silver Star for valor. 5 months before that spring night, Ralph married his neighbour, 41-year-old Jonna Flores. She moved next door, from her house into his. The marriage was his 5th. Hers was not her first either. Shortly before midnight on March 10th, Ralph woke and left the bedroom to get water. As he moved through the house, he heard sounds coming from the living room. When he entered, he saw a man on top of his wife on the floor. Ralph turned around, went back to the bedroom, opened his nightstand and retrieved his revolver. He returned to the living room and fired 3 shots. The man collapsed and died where he fell. On the 911 call that followed, Ralph refused to render aid. He believed the man was an intruder. He believed his wife had been attacked. He was calm, direct, and unapologetic.
Some guy was fornicating with my wife while he put back up my gun in my child.
Is he awake, sir?
No, he's dead.
Oh, he's dead?
I hope so.
By morning, those assumptions began to fall apart. The man was identified as 32-year-old Walter Conley. He was not a stranger. Walter Conley had been part of Jonna Flores' life for years. They had dated on and off. They had lived together. They had worked together. He had rented a room in Jonna's house next door even after her marriage to Ralph. Their relationship had not ended with the wedding. Walter had a tattoo of Jonna's face on his arm. Ralph had met him more than once. 2 weeks before the marriage, Jonna was arrested after firing a gun during an argument with Walter. She claimed she had asked him to leave repeatedly. He told police she had invited him to stay. Ralph bailed her out of jail. The charges were later dropped. Jonna described herself as a heavy drinker, prone to blackouts. She told investigators she had no memory of the night Walter was killed. She said she believed her husband when he claimed he didn't know about the affair. Investigators did not find that believable. Ralph Wald was charged with second-degree murder. The state argued that what happened was not self-defense, but rage. An older husband discovering his younger wife with a lover and reacting violently. Prosecutors suggested jealousy played a role, pointing to the couple's lack of intimacy and Ralph's health issues. The defense told a different story. They argued that Ralph acted exactly as he had been trained to act: identify a threat, neutralize it, protect the person beside him. He believed his wife was being assaulted. He believed his life was in danger next.
But he never saw his face. They were on the ground. And he said, "Get out!" To this day, his marriage has not been consummated because of these problems. The deceased grabs Jonna by the arms and, using her as a human shield, starts trying to avoid that gun.
I shot him because he was forcing himself on my wife. And as far as I knew, when he finished with her, he was going to kill me.
We're going to fight him on the streets, in the cities, on the beaches, in the courtroom, until I remove every trace of Mr. Moody's infected fingers from my client's file. The deceased actually used his wife as a human shield when he saw the weapon. We have demanded speedy trial because they would not grant a war hero entitled to wear the Silver Star a bond.
Florida's Stand Your Ground law applied. Ralph never changed his account. Not on the 911 call, not in police interviews, not at trial. He said he never saw the man's face. He said he told him to get out. He said the man grabbed Jonna and used her as a shield. He said that if he hadn't acted, they both could have been killed. The trial lasted 3 days. Jonna testified for the defense, stating she was blackout drunk and remembered almost nothing. She admitted she never fully ended the relationship with Walter. Ralph testified after her, speaking of love, loyalty, and his belief that he had done the only thing possible. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Ralph Wald was found not guilty. He left the courthouse embraced by his wife and lawyers, while Walter Connolly's family watched in silence. After the trial, Ralph gave interviews. He said he regretted the loss of life but stood by his actions. He said Walter should not have been in his home at midnight with his wife. He said he would do the same thing again. Despite public appearances, the marriage deteriorated. Both Ralph and Jonna drank heavily. Arguments became physical. Nearly a year before her death, Jonna was arrested for throwing a metal picture frame at Ralph, cutting his leg. The charge was later dropped. She told relatives she'd begun to fear him. She said he would come into her room at night while she slept. She worried he might kill her. She never left. When deputies returned to the house in 2019, Ralph told them his health had declined. He listed numerous medical problems and said he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He admitted to PTSD. He initially denied having guns in the home, then corrected himself when they were found. When questioned further, he asked for an attorney. The same revolver used to kill Walter Connolly had been used again. This time, the victim was his wife. Ralph was charged with manslaughter and released on bond.
911, what's your emergency?
There's something wrong with my wife.
Is your wife breathing at this point?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Can you tell me what's going on?
I don't know what's going on. My wife is non-responsive.
Okay. Is she conscious? I know she's not responsive.
No, she's not non-responsive. That's what I said.
Okay.
I was in bed. She was out here on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
I came out and I spoke to her and she did not respond. And
Are her eyes open?
she's like all collapsed over.
Is she breathing?
Yeah, 'cause I don't think so.
Our office received a 911 call in reference to an unresponsive female at 513 Third Drive. So that when deputies arrived on scene, it was apparent that the female was deceased and had some upper body trauma. Detectives have been on scene and are now in the process of securing a search warrant to further the investigation. And that's all we have with this interesting question.
The history of the house is a little, we've heard some stories about that. What can you tell us about this place?
Sir, we're aware of the history, but it is way too early investigation to reveal anything further.
The case dragged on, delayed by health concerns, mental evaluations, and the COVID-19 pandemic. The trial never began. On January 19th, 2023, Ralph Wald died while still awaiting court proceedings. He was 80 years old. No jury would ever decide his guilt or innocence a second time,